The city was alive with its usual rhythm, cars rushing past, people lost in their own worlds. The hum of daily life blending into the background. It was just another ordinary afternoon for Jason, a young man in his early 20s, who had just finished a long day at work. He wasn't anyone special, just a regular guy trying to make ends meet, juggling part-time jobs while dreaming of something bigger. But fate had a way of turning the most unremarkable days into something unforgettable. As he waited at the crosswalk, his mind was occupied with thoughts of bills, his rent due soon, and the growing uncertainty of his future. That was when he noticed her, an elderly woman standing at the edge of the sidewalk, her frail frame hesitant as she clutched her small handbag tightly. She seemed nervous, watching the cars zoom past, the blaring horns only adding to her anxiety. People around her barely spared a glance, too caught up in their own lives to notice her struggle. Jason hesitated for a moment. He could just walk away, pretend he hadn't seen anything, like everyone else, but something in the way her hands trembled, the uncertainty in her eyes, made it impossible for him to ignore. Without a second thought, he stepped forward. "Ma'am, do you need some help?" he asked gently. The woman turned to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and surprise. "Oh dear, I just need to get across. But these cars." She let out a nervous chuckle, shaking her head as if embarrassed. Jason smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, I'll walk with you." He offered his arm, and after a brief pause, she took it. Together, they stepped onto the street, Jason keeping a careful pace to match her slow, deliberate steps. The city's chaos seemed to fade for a moment as he focused on guiding her safely to the other side. Drivers noticed them and slowed down, a rare display of patience in a city always in a hurry. When they finally reached the sidewalk on the opposite side, the woman let out a breath, smiling up at him. "Thank you, young man. That was very kind of you." Jason shrugged, giving her a casual grin. "It's no problem at all." She studied him for a second, as if trying to remember something, then nodded to herself. "What's your name?" "Jason," he answered. "Well, Jason, it's not often that people stop to help these days. You have a good heart," she said warmly. Then, just as quickly as the moment had begun, she gave him a small nod and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Jason watched her go, feeling an unexpected warmth in his chest. It wasn't every day he got a chance to do something genuinely kind for a stranger. With a satisfied sigh, he continued on his way, never thinking twice about the encounter. But fate wasn't finished with him yet. Days passed, and life went on. As usual, Jason continued with his routine, working his shifts, worrying about money, dreaming about a better future, but never quite knowing how to get there. Then, one afternoon, as he was scrolling through his phone, a message popped up from an unknown number. "Jason, I need to see you. Please meet me at the corner cafe on 5th Street. It's important." Jason frowned. Who would be messaging him out of the blue? He thought about ignoring it, assuming it was some mistake, but something about it felt different. Against his better judgment, curiosity got the best of him. He decided to go. When he arrived at the cafe, his eyes scanned the room, searching for anyone who might be expecting him. And then, there she was, the same elderly woman he had helped that day. She was sitting at a small table near the window, a warm smile playing on her lips as she looked up and met his eyes. Jason walked over cautiously. "Mom," she gestured, to the chair across from her. "Sit, please." Still confused, but intrigued, he took a seat. The woman folded her hands on the table, studying him closely before she finally spoke. "You don't know who I am, do you?" Jason shook his head. "I'm sorry, I don't." She chuckled. I thought so. You see, Jason, most people recognize me instantly, but you just saw an old lady who needed help, and you didn't hesitate. He blinked, trying to understand what she meant. I don't really get it. She leaned in slightly. My name is Eleanor Hastings. She paused, as if waiting for a reaction. When Jason didn't show any sign of recognition, she smiled. I own Hastings Enterprises. Jason's mind went blank for a second. Hastings Enterprises. Even he had heard of it. A multi-million-dollar company with businesses all over the country. It was a name tied to wealth, success, and power, and the woman sitting across from him was the owner. His heart pounded in his chest. Wait, you're that Eleanor Hastings? She nodded. Yes, and I asked you to come here today because I want to change your life. Jason's breath caught. Change his life. He had no idea what was happening, but he could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Eleanor smiled again, but this time there was something deeper in her gaze, something that told him his life was about to take a turn he never could have predicted. And at that moment, Jason realized that one small act of kindness had set something in motion, something far bigger than he ever imagined. Jason felt like he was in a dream. He sat frozen in place, his mind racing as he stared at Eleanor Hastings, a woman he had unknowingly helped just days ago. And now, she was sitting across from him, saying things that made no sense, things that sounded too good to be true. He cleared his throat, trying to find the right words. I don't understand. What do you mean you want to change my life? Eleanor chuckled softly, her eyes filled with a knowing warmth. I mean exactly that, Jason. But before I explain, tell me something. What do you want most in life? Jason hesitated. No one had ever asked him that before. Not in a way that made him feel like the answer truly mattered. He thought about his struggles, the endless cycle of work, the constant worry about money, the dreams he had buried because they seemed too far out of reach, I guess. He exhaled slowly. I just want a real shot. A chance to do something meaningful, to build a life I can be proud of. Eleanor nodded, as if she had expected that answer. And what's stopping you? Jason let out a dry laugh. Everything. Bills, rent, responsibilities. I can barely keep my head above water as it is. It's hard to chase dreams when you're just trying to survive. Eleanor studied him for a moment before reaching into her bag. She pulled out a small envelope and slid it across the table toward him. Jason hesitated, then picked it up, his fingers shaking slightly as he opened it. Inside was a check with his name on it, a check for $50,000. Jason's breath caught in his throat. He looked at Eleanor, his heart pounding. What is this? It's a gift, she said simply. A small one. His hands trembled as he set the check down. I can't accept this. Eleanor smiled. Yes, you can. And you will. Jason shook his head. I don't understand. Why would you do this for me? I just helped you cross the street. Her expression turned serious. That's exactly why. You helped me without expecting anything in return. Do you know how rare that is? She leaned forward slightly. People see wealth and status, and suddenly they want something. But when I was just an old woman struggling to cross the street, you didn't hesitate. You didn't ask who I was or what I could do for you. You just helped. Jason swallowed hard, overwhelmed by the weight of her words. But this? He motioned toward the check. This is too much. I didn't do anything to deserve it. Eleanor's eyes softened. That's where you're wrong. Kindness deserves to be rewarded. She paused, then added, and besides, this isn't just a gift. It's an opportunity. Jason frowned. An opportunity for what? Eleanor's lips curled into a small smile. To prove yourself. His mind raced. This wasn't just a random act of generosity. There was something more to it. He looked at her cautiously. What exactly are you asking me to do? Eleanor's expression remained calm, but her tone carried an unmistakable weight. I want you to come work for me. Jason blinked. Work for you? She nodded. At Hastings Enterprises. I've built a company that stands for integrity, hard work, and ambition. I see something in you, Jason. You remind me of myself when I was younger. Hungry for more, but trapped by circumstances. I want to give you a chance to break free from that. Jason's mind spun. This was insane. A week ago, he was struggling to make ends meet, and now he was being offered a job at one of the biggest companies in the country. It didn't seem real. But why me? He asked, still grappling with the weight of it all. Eleanor's smile deepened. Because I believe in people who don't expect the world to hand them anything, but still choose to do the right thing. Jason stared at her, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Still, doubt crept in. What if I fail? Eleanor's gaze was steady. Then you pick yourself up and try again. Jason sat there, feeling the gravity of the moment. This was more than just a job offer. It was a lifeline. A door opening to a future he never thought possible. But he also knew that nothing came without a cost. There had to be more to this, and he had a feeling that stepping into Eleanor Hastings' world was going to change everything. Maybe in ways he wasn't ready for. Jason stared at Eleanor, his mind still struggling to process everything. Just a few days ago, he had been a regular guy, trying to get by. Now he was sitting across from one of the wealthiest women in the country, holding a check for $50,000 and an offer that could change his life forever. A part of him still hesitated. This kind of thing didn't happen in real life. It felt too good to be true, and deep down he was afraid. Afraid of stepping into a world he knew nothing about, afraid of messing up, afraid that somehow this was all a mistake. But then he thought about his life before this moment, the endless cycle of struggling, of watching opportunities slip away because he didn't have the means to chase them. This was a chance, maybe the only one he'd ever get, to break free from that. He took a deep breath and met Eleanor's gaze. Okay, he said, I'll do it. Eleanor's face lit up with approval. Good choice. And just like that, Jason's life changed. The next few weeks were unlike anything he had ever experienced. He was brought into Hastings Enterprises, not as an assistant fetching coffee, but as someone Eleanor personally mentored. She threw him into situations he wasn't prepared for. High-stakes meetings, business negotiations, moments where his decisions actually mattered. He was overwhelmed at first, constantly feeling like he was one mistake, away from proving he didn't belong. But Eleanor never let him fall. She pushed him, but she also guided him. Slowly, Jason began to grow into his role, learning things he never thought he'd understand. He started to see business not as some distant, impossible world, but as something he could be a part of. And most importantly, he realized that Eleanor wasn't just testing him. She was shaping him into something more. Yet, not everyone was happy about his sudden rise. Many within the company questioned why Eleanor had taken such an interest in Jason. Rumors spread. Some said he was her long-lost relative. Others whispered that he had some dirt on her. The truth, however, was much simpler. Eleanor had chosen Jason because she saw something in him that no one else had, but not everyone believed in her judgment. One afternoon, Jason was called into a meeting with the board of directors. He expected a normal discussion, but instead he was met with cold stares and sharp words. This experiment of yours has gone on long enough, Eleanor. One of the board members said, "This boy has no experience. He doesn't belong here." Jason felt the weight of their words. But before he could respond, Eleanor spoke. "Tell me," she said calmly. "How many of you built yourselves from nothing?" Silence. Eleanor's eyes swept across the room. "That's what I thought." She gestured toward Jason. "This young man reminds me of myself. I didn't come from money. I wasn't handed success. I fought for every inch of it, just like he's doing now. And mark my words, one day he's going to prove all of you wrong." Jason felt something shift inside him. For the first time in his life, someone truly believed in him. But then, just as things seemed to be settling, the unthinkable happened. Eleanor collapsed in the middle of a meeting. The room erupted into chaos as people rushed to her side. Calling for help, Jason knelt beside her, his heart pounding. "Eleanor, stay with me." She gave him a weak smile. "You'll be fine, Jason. I've made sure of it." Those words haunted him as she was rushed to the hospital. The next few days were a blur of worry and uncertainty. He sat outside her hospital room, replaying every lesson she had taught him, every piece of wisdom she had shared. Then the news came. Eleanor had passed away. Jason felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath him. She had been more than a mentor. She had been a force in his life, someone who saw his potential when no one else did. And now, she was gone. But just when he thought it was over, another shock awaited him. Eleanor had left behind something unexpected. Her lawyer handed Jason a document, a will rewritten just weeks before. And as Jason read the words, his hands trembled. Eleanor had named him the new head of Hastings Enterprises. He couldn't believe it. The board was furious, demanding that he step down, that he wasn't fit for the role. But Jason wasn't the same person he had been weeks ago. He stood his ground. This company was built by someone who believed in taking chances. Jason said firmly, "And I may not have the experience you all do, but I've learned from the very best. Eleanor didn't choose me on a whim. She saw something in me, just like she saw something in all of you when she built this company from the ground up. So I'm not walking away. I'm gonna prove her right." It wasn't easy. The fight to earn respect, to prove he could handle the responsibility, was a battle every single day. But Jason never backed down. He poured everything he had into the company, making mistakes, learning from them, and growing into the leader Eleanor always knew he could be. And in the end, he did prove them wrong. Years later, as he stood in his office, overlooking the city, he thought about the day it all began. The day he helped a stranger cross the street, never knowing that small act of kindness would change his life forever. Eleanor had given him a chance, and he had made the most of it, and now it was his turn to do the same for someone else.